Planning, as we remember from previous part of lecture, is the second phase of the project life cycle and the most important one, I should say. It includes the whole spectrum, meaning and topics to be presented. So we are going now to see how the adult learning theories can be used to support learning needs, to compare two approaches, output and competency-oriented curriculum development, so you'll decide which way is yours, to defining learning objectives, to discuss development of the curriculum as a core part of adult learning process. We'll start with the question, what motivates an adult to learn? Curiosity or simple need to know, desire to develop some definite skills or social needs, wish to be just to be with other nice people. Educational researchers have come up with an array of answers to this question. The truth is that adults are complex individuals, and so there is no one-size-fits-all answer. Adult learning theories provide a foundation to define a learning need to its most appropriate solution. There is no single theory which explains how and why adults learn best. However, each one sheds light on the particular aspect of adult learning. So let's continue our happiness exercise. As said before, we don't deal with the content of the course, but after needs assessment phase, we can anticipate what kind of knowledge and skills potential participants need. Biologically, a human being is created to be happy. We just have to decide what it means for a person. To one, it means to be in the right place and to be satisfied with the job. For another, that means to discover value of himself and grow up happiness skills or find sources of positive emotions and develop positive thinking skills. So I'm going to present a short review of 6 adult learning theories elaborated by fathers of andragogy, to see how each can be used to support overall learning needs. And you please try to apply them to our exercise or to your own course as a pattern. So first is andragogy. As you know from previous modules developed by Malcolm Knowles in 1968, andragogy is described by its creator as as an art and science helping adults to learn. I'll just remind 4 principles of the science. Adults learn better from experience. Adults favor a pragmatic approach and must be able to apply learning to solve a specific problem. They prefer to have immediate relevance. Adults need to be involved in the planning and evaluation of their learning. So this approach is suitable for self-motivated learners who prefer structured formal learning with the applied goals. Within this system, the key question is what kind of knowledge will make participants happy. Transformative learning, this third theory developed by Jack Mezerow in 1978, posits that all learners use different assumptions, expectations and beliefs to make sense of world around them. It helps learners to transform their existing frames of reference through a process of problem solving, tasks and self-reflection. Learning transformation process of occur when individuals face a disorientation that challenges their existing beliefs and critically reflect upon what has taken place. It's considered one of the stickiest type of learning because it can shift an individual's perspective on how to behave, interact and problem solve. It is suitable for personal change and growth mindset. Next is experiential learning, developed by David Kolb, also in 70s. It requires a hand-on approach that puts the learner in the center of the learning experience. The 4 elements of experimental learning are active involvement, reflection upon practice, conceptualization of the experience and use of knowledge gained from experience. It is suitable for process-oriented tasks and mechanical skills development. Then comes self-directed learning, which is rooted in Knowles' theory of adult learning. Later elements of self-management were added to the model. It is a process where individuals take the initiative to define learning needs, form learning goals, identify resources, implement a learning plan, and assess their own results. The process occurs with the help of teachers, mentors, resources, and peers. It is suitable for technology-based learning, online courses, where self-motivated learners take control of all learning process and decisions. Project-based learning, developed by John Dewey, holds that the learners acquire deeper knowledge through active exploration of real problems. He called this principle learning by doing, which is actual till nowadays. This process is believed to increase the possibility of long-term retention of skills and knowledge. Action learning. It is an approach to problem solving that involves taking action and reflecting on the results. The goal of action learning is to improve problem solving process and simplify the solutions. This approach tackles problems by the first asking question to clarify the problem, reflecting and identifying possible solutions, and only then taking an action. Questions build group dialogue, develop innovative and systematic critical thinking, and improve learning results. It's the best suited for filling in gaps in organizational knowledge or team building. All these approaches are similar in one way. They try to move away from the traditional system of education based mostly on knowledge. Each approach has a lot of advantages, but also requires special planning of the curriculum. Nowadays, the entire palette of approaches has been divided between two concepts: outcomes-based education and competency-based education for adults. So this is the starting point of any course design. So we'll pay attention to both concepts. Outcomes-based education is an approach to learning and training that emphasizes what the learners are expected to achieve, the outcomes. These outcomes require that the learners are able to demonstrate what they have learned and required knowledge, skills, and attitudes. By contrast, traditional education, though obviously has outcomes, focuses on the inputs provided to learner, the subject matter, content, curriculum, teaching. Outcome-based education focuses on the significance of the final exit outcomes. Therefore, it means defining, organizing, and directing all aspects of the education and qualification giving system into relation to the things that all learners should be able to demonstrate successfully when they exit the program. An outcome-based education program is usually designed backwards from the exit outcomes. The curriculum and all learning activities should therefore directly or indirectly help learners achieve the outcomes. The teaching is made available in appropriate time and uses the necessary strategies and methods to encourage all learners to be successful and to reach her or his goal. It is usually concentrates on assessment and criteria for assessment of the outcomes to determine whether learners have achieved the stated outcome. After a period of popularity, this approach has been criticized. Generally, it's now recognized that not only outcomes, but the other aspects of teaching are also important. So to say shortly, outcomes-based approach is characterized by the following features. The emphasis on the results of learning, outcomes, focus on learning by doing, learning the content opportunities for the recognition of the prior learning, and emphasizes the application of learning in a new and different context. Assessing learning outcomes is a challenge that could have wider benefits. For example, a learning outcomes approach would theoretically allow all outcomes, including those in courses leading to qualification, to be identified, assessed, and used to evaluate progress. But as some researchers consider, this approach hardly allowed to identify and record a summary of students' achievements outside their main studies, such as soft skills, or giving a talk in public, sharing her or his views in a large group. How can we show that learning is related to teaching or a period of educational activity? How do we take account of learning which happens after a course has finished, but related to a topic? Maybe some results might be described as an unanticipated learning outcomes, or even value added to the intended learning outcome. Once I've met a woman at a conference who came to me and started to say thank you. What for? She told me her story. She lives in the countryside and has 5 children and hasn't worked for many years, of course. But the children grew up and she wanted to have a job, and she went to the local administration for an interview. She was asked about her work experience. She didn't know what to say, and so she told them about a seminar where she was participant and I've been a trainer. So the reaction was positive. She was told that she had an innovative experience and would be a very valuable employee. When we've met, she has been working for a year or more and was very happy about it. After this story, I asked myself about outcomes planned to drill. Is it perfectly reasonable for provider of education to claim that both intended and unanticipated learning outcomes indicate student achievement? So there is another question. Everybody knows the famous saying by UNESCO, education for adults must be fun. I like it myself. Recently, research supports the link between fun and learning process and the development long-term memory. Educational psychologists agree that students learn and retain more information when the learning is associated with the strong positive emotion. Does it mean that recording learning outcomes should include such elements like enjoyment, pleasure, developed social contacts? All of us have to think hard about how to measure learning outcomes as a system, including such elements as students' individual needs and objectives, tutors' initial objectives, students' assessment of the extent to which they have achieved these objectives, tutors' notes of whether and how students have achieved these learning outcomes, students' unanticipated learning outcomes, and altogether synthesis of achievement by the group. One more possibility to provide direct evidence and output is the information about students' progression. Progress implies forward movement from one point on a scale to the next one. Many students in adult education have had experience of disappointment, frustration and failure earlier at school and are looking for a more positive educational experience in adult education. Courses could provide possibility to go at his or her own pace without the fear or being judged a failure. Providers should therefore support the students, offering a learning environment that is neither daunting nor pressurized, and which is tolerant of failure, experimental, and so on. Detailed comments on progress and how in the light of this the student might improve would be good decision. Competency-based education is another approach which can be adopted to many educational models. Generally, competencies are defined as a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitudes applied appropriately to context in order to achieve desired outcome or to solve a problem. There are essential or so-called key competencies, are those which all individuals need for personal fulfillment, active citizenship, and employability through lifelong learning in the modern knowledge society. The European reference framework sets out 8 key competencies: communication in the mother tongue, communication in foreign languages, mathematical competence and base competences in science and technology, digital competence, learning to learn, social and civic competences, sense of initiative and entrepreneurship, cultural awareness and expression. The key competences are equally important because each of them can contribute to a successful life. Competence in the fundamental basic skills of language, literacy, numeracy, and information and communication technologies is an essential foundation for learning, and learning to learn supports all learning activities. There are a number of applied competences such as critical thinking, creativity, initiative, problem solving, risk assessment, decision taking, and constructive management of feeling. They play a role in all 8 key competences. Key competences are a focus of lifelong learning policies and important for realization of both on individual and community perspectives. They are the essence of human capital in the new reality, which is concerned with learners acquire their skills and knowledge more than it will be with the measures used to validate their learning. Now we turn to competency-based education models. This approach focuses on the final outcome and not on the journey that leads to the outcome. Adult students tend to be attracted to this model of education because they can see the end from the very beginning. The majority of adult learners are trying to fit the enhancement of their education into a limited amount of time. Only few are willing to stop working and delegate family obligations in order to focus on personal educational endeavors. So the first positive aspect of competency-based education in promotion of individualized learning. At the same time, we have to take into account that the results assessment become here more prominent and critical. This model may encourage the tendency for a go, sit time and skip straight to the assessment. In fact, in many formats, the assessments are the only student artifacts that contribute to the course grade. The judgment about what to be measured should be based on the combination of knowledge, skills, theories, and the most of all practical applications of the discipline being assessed. The other attraction for adult people to choose this education model is possibility to continue life and work. They don't need to pass through all and each activities to end before having chance to take the final exam. In some competency-based courses, students may select which resources they will use to prepare for the final exam, including their previous experience. Self-directed education can be empowering in such case. During his studies, a student often gets one-to-one interaction from instructor. Cultivating independent learning skills also could be seen as the positive aspect. This approach requires that instructors or mentors develop interpersonal communication skills, especially within online courses. There are mostly 2 types of communicating with students. An instructor can provide individual support to learner, asking questions, giving mid-term feedback, or he can be responsible for different options or types of educational activities, information or inputs delivery, tasks or practice design, and corrections as well. In modern conditions, adult-friendly, competency-based education models produce innovations and technical improvements. There are many organizations, including NGOs, use them successfully. At the same time, researchers stress that the overall goal of education is to serve larger human and civic purposes and to offer social interaction to learners, which is hardly possible choosing competency-based education model. In this sense, the starting point to choose a model of education is the type of activities for future. The role of professionals and their education is an important part of the social economy and depends very much on the flexible needs of the economy and lifelong learning contexts. According to national classifications of occupation, if they do exist in the country, jobs are different, but the patterns of activity within professions are similar. As the term competence is defined as knowledge, skills, and responsibility, it is possible to divide competences into a lot of generic and specific categories, functions, activities, duties, and so on. Depending on the point of view, they might be personal and professional competencies. To define competence profiles, one needs to list different competences and then to clarify the interrelations between them. After them, itemize skills and practices as well, according to each of them. But in real life, it can happen that professionals who have all necessary competences still don't act competently. At the same time, those who don't have approved level of professionalism might be able to act competently. This discursive gap also might be a kind of concern or organization dealing with competency-based vocational learning focus on the development of competencies frameworks. The program development of basic structural elements of the program and vocational training of adults is performed through 4 parallel and interdependent processes. 2 of them regard work and other 2 learning. So the first 2 are the description of work, occupation, job, and individual work function, which relates to work conditions and content. Work competencies that are necessary for performing certain job and tasks. And specification of conditions and norms which relates under which the education and learning process is being realized. So materials, technical or human resources. And the second part is specification of learning, the identification of knowledge, skills and competencies necessary for working in an occupation or performing a job. So to precise definition of goals, outcomes, content and ways to successfully acquire previously identified knowledge, skills and work competencies. And the second is specification of evaluation and assessment concerning program adoption and identification of ways and criteria to test what has been learned. A precise description of general functions, duties, activities and work tasks within the framework of the particular work function is occupational profile. To construct profile means to analyze concrete occupation, to define profile and to compare or create occupation standard. Analysis starts with the researching conditions, basic principles, levels of performance, technical frameworks, general functions, activities, duties, procedures, and operations that are performed. Important component of the description is list of needed instruments, tools, and materials. On the basis of the profile, professional standards are to be produced. For each standard, there is theoretical basis and empirical foundation, demonstrating need for its professional and its importance in the country economy. At this point, we could move deeply into issues regarding normative and anticipated needs, but they seem penetrate to another economy level, so that's not our subject. In additional material to this lecture, you'll find an activity description table which might be useful for vocational course designing in the model of the competency-based learning. Educational organization chooses model for its activity in accordance with the priorities, traditions, openness to the local needs, etc. Program presentation in NGOs is also a question of decision making. The benchmark to be chosen is a goal formulation. So we'll see three most popular approaches. First is also mentioned before. It helps to make results visible and concrete. It's called SMART, and it was already discussed. And I'd like just to remind that SMART outcomes are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timed. In the additional materials for self-directed learning, you'll find a table illustrating output results in the Happiness Project, and you are welcome to observe them critically. The second approach, called SPICE, and should be interpreted in the broad understanding of learning philosophy. Summarizing factors shape on learning success, the SPICE of learning are social, physical, intellectual, cultural, and emotional connections to learning. We'll not discuss each of them, but all mentioned factors must be understood and supported if learners are to reach their true potential. The approach relates to the learner's personality and background, and the beliefs, attitudes, interests, and experiences that shape his or her identity. It considers family influences that affect the learner's thinking and actions, and refers to self-worth, confidence level, motivation, and moral. The emotional factors is being recognized as the powerful force in learning success. The learner's feelings hugely influence their connections with the others in the circle and their learning subject. Emotional intelligence plays a crucial role in learning. The third is Bloom's taxonomy. It is the third approach, and it is classification of the different objectives and skills that education set for their students. It includes the following levels of learning, which could be used to structure the learning objectives, lessons, and assessment of any educational activity. So they are remembering, which means retrieving, recognizing, and recalling relevant knowledge from long-term memory. Understanding means constructing meaning from oral, written, or graphic messages through interpreting, classifying, summarizing, comparing, and explaining. Applying, which means carrying out using a procedure for implementing. Analyzing, breaking material into parts or pieces, determining how the parts relate to one another and to overall structure. Evaluating, making judgment based on criteria and standards. And creating, putting elements together to form a function whole, reorganizing elements into a new pattern. You'll see Bloom's taxonomy often displayed as a pyramid graphic to demonstrate hierarchy. Learning at higher levels is dependent on knowledge and skills at lower levels. It explains that the process of learning, however, we don't always start from the lower order skills. It's also true. So we can use different approaches to formulate a goal of educational activity, but it's important not to overlook the range of complex background spaces and conditions affecting the lives of people who experience the injustice of poverty and social marginalization. Being logic structure, outcomes approaches, risks managing out of view what really matters in adult education through grid of outcomes, whether for non-formal or formal education. Contexts mean that government and other funders need to recognize that those of higher need require a distinct targeting with the most intensive resources. Next issue is a program elaboration. First, some words as an introduction. During classes with adult students, I prefer to speak with my own voice and to be myself. This is possible if the course program is thought out and built in a logic that is understandable for me as an educator. Not all teachers who work with adults have a basic pedagogical education, but they still have to develop programs and submit them to the administration. For organization leaders, it is important to demonstrate to stakeholders and to the headquarters the high level of quality of training in the organization, and the variety of quality prepared, unified style programs could be a strong argument in favor of the organization. Therefore, I suggest you to think about how training programs are created and how quality issues are to be applied to them. It hardly makes sense to talk about the program in the abstract, so you may use this 5-step model to develop a new program or compare the proposed model with already developed course. So what is a program? Program is a structured framework for the organization and realization of the education, as well as the achievement of the intended learning outcomes. The program defines goals, outcomes, content of education, processes and activities of program and curriculum, achievement and realization. The stages of the developing any curriculum can be presented as following steps. First is preliminary block. It defines the context. The description of the environmental things which the program will be implemented gives an idea of the context or environmental factors, human, situational, cultural, organizational, that must be taken into account when creating a program. It will become clear why the course is currently in demand, what problem or set of problems or contradictions it helps to solve, what are the characteristics of the target group, and so on. Finally, here you can find information about what can help to implement the program, motivation of students or interests of society, the needs of the market. These are the results of the assessment of educational needs that we identified using various tools at the previous stage of course preparation and in the previous part of our lecture. If there are any risks or obstacles, they should be mentioned here as well. The second block is called basic. Formulation of program goals and definition of program ideas contains key provision that define the specific of the program. In the difference from similar training program, the definition of program idea is answer on the questions of how these planned results will be achieved, how from the author's point of view the training process should be organized in the most effective way. We'll already discussed goal formulating strategies. Goal is a clear statement of the expected results that will be achieved in the course of educational activities. There are 3 types of learning goals. First is educational, so what values and social experiences does the participant acquire? The second, training, so what skills can be learned as a result of training activities? And the third one is subjective. They are set before themselves by the students, and therefore they are the strongest motivator. The key questions are: what will change in my life after I finish this training? What will be the best result? How will I know that it was achieved? Finding out the subjective goals is the part of curriculum. They are determined in the beginning of the course together with the students, and of course are not included in the program. When determining subjective goals, the active position of the participant is triggered, which helps him to become an equal co-creator of the learning process. Participants should feel that their goals and their desires are being taken into account. In some courses, I meet people who have limited learning experience or who studied at a higher school many years ago. Often when they are asked about their expectations and personal goals, they are surprised. What do I want? I don't know. Just to be here, just to be with these people. Why can't it be just like this? Although goal setting is a basic skill for learning, it can be difficult for adult people to formulate their goals and expectations. To help adults navigate this modern learning format, it makes sense to give examples or to tell them what does goal mean. For example, strengthen the development of personality, help people to solve everyday problems, prepare people for possible future professional employment, learn some approaches or techniques for working in a particular type of activity, learn to make a balanced and informed choice in order to implement the idea of the civic society, for example. The third block is called Tool block, and it includes creation of educational plans. Creating a learning plan means the basis for interaction between student, teachers and resources, information, etc. The learning plan reflects the content, scope, logic and sequence of knowledge transfer. Educational program is a collaborative effort training trainer and participant. Expected results depend not only on the activities of the trainer or teacher, but also from the students themselves, their motivation, desires, willingness to priority training over other activities and spheres of life, from the ability to combine them, from relationships that develop in the learning process. In this sense, special importance belongs to the methodology and techniques of the training, a set of methods that are adequate to the goal and content of training and to the characteristics of the target group. The content of this block can be visualized as a table which includes the following parameters: topic, methods, exercise, forms of activity, hours, and expected results. The tool block just presents the course design, framework, and knowledge transfer strategies. The fourth block is organizational and material block. Organization of the learning process contains information related to the process of conducting class. This section of the program answers the following questions as detailed as possible. So, what training tools, materials, literature are needed? What equipment, devices, manuals, tools are needed? What are the specific requirements to the organization of the learning environment? For example, furniture, lighting, taking into account specifics of the program and the characteristics of the target group. What are the requirements for the time management? Are there any specific requirements for a teacher, for example? So, and the next one is, and the last one, evaluation. So this block reflects the nature of receiving feedback, understanding the learning results. The purpose of evaluating is to determine in what respect have the goals been achieved. And the second, do I need changes, adjustment in the course program? The evaluation methods are discussed in details in Module 4. So here I just note that the course evaluation is carried out in 3 stages: before the start of training, the goal presentation, acceptance of the goals, combination of goals of the program with the subjective goals of students. At this stage you can get an answer to the question about the needs to make adjustment to the program. The second is during training, so it is called current evaluation, when the trainer is convinced that the experience is valuable for participants and the learning process is moving towards achieving the stated goals. The trainer receives information about the overall emotional background of classes and internal mood of participants and group dynamics. And the third is after course. The final evaluation is comparison of the result obtained with the course goals. Conclusions about achievements. It is based on the self-assessment and reflection of participants. It helps students to understand what they have learned and where they can go next. The forms of receiving feedback can be different. The most common form is questionnaire, Yeah, I agree with those who call questionnaire smiling pieces of paper. Adults often perceive them as a way to thank for training and not to opportunity to evaluate the results achieved. So a kaleidoscope of oral and written questions, games and visual methods give more information. They can be used for immediate results getting and for results of the day. The greatest confidence is achieved when the various forms are combined on the implementation stage, which we are going to consider in the next part of our lecture.